Pay attention is something I heard a lot when I was a kid. I have what nowadays we call attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but that wasn't a thing when I was a kid. Now, here's the thing. As someone with ADHD, hearing somebody shouting, "Pay attention!" Well, it's about as likely to get me focused on something quite other than what 9 times 8 is. As a matter of fact, I'm more likely to be thinking about what a strange phrase, pay attention, is. Where does that come from? Pay attention? Who's Mr. Attention? How come he needs paying? Does he take cash? Oh, and speaking of costing something, I had a friend in college whose favorite song was "How Much Is That Doggy in the Window?" A very odd song to have as your favorite, don't you think? Just telling you how my mind works. And by the way, "How Much Is That Doggy in the Window" was a #1 hit for Patti Page from Kansas, who worked with Benny Goodman for a while, okay? And that song was the first #1 single by a female artist in the United Kingdom on the music charts back in 1953. I was a disc jockey for several years when I was young, and so everyone in my generation knew about that. That wasn't by Patti Page because Mercury Records did not distribute in the United Kingdom in those days. It was instead by a woman by the name of Lita Rosa. She lived in pre-Beatles Liverpool. She was a huge influence on, anybody else with ADHD like me? Yeah. Elton John. He was a favorite singer for Elton for a while. Oh, but where was I, For some of us, paying attention costs a lot. Paying attention became very important after the advent of the agricultural revolution. In the Western world, we've been told to pay attention ever since. One theory for why ADHD exists is that for the first 70,000 years or so of human evolution, there was a need for 2 types of people: those who can focus and those who notice and process as much sensory stimulus as possible all the time. Those who can focus are gatherers, those who can't are hunters. Might be true. It makes me feel better anyway. But paying attention is really important in our culture today. The agricultural revolution gave us the hierarchy paradigm that we live with today. Each of us is seen as a microcosm of the universe in which reason is in control, just as monarchs are in control of kingdoms and gods are in control of the universe itself. For people in the Western world, attention is something to be paid and to be directed. It takes work, and those of us who have great difficulty focusing are often ignored and passed over. In the Western world, attention is a commodity that is bought and sold. Now, Taoists, Hindus, Buddhists, on the other hand, have paid considerably more attention to just what attention is. And in Eastern thought, attention is a way of using your own mind to focus on your consciousness and how your mind operates. So, my first question to ask today is, for each of us, as we attempt to find ways of living with our own minds, don't we do better to pay attention to what we pay attention to? What was I paying attention to? Kind of meta thought. Because in the end, the attention we pay is the life we spend. Now, our theme for the month of November is attention. Next week, Rev Jim will be considering some of the things that demand our attention and maybe aren't so good to be attending to. Today, I'm trying to consider what paying attention even means. In examining this problem as a person with ADHD, I'll be employing today, hammers, nails, top 40 songs, steam engines, rabbis, my favorite Spanish philosopher, Popeye, John Dillinger, flowers, and astrology. Because that's the way my mind works. In your order of service this morning is a little quote from the psychologist Abraham Maslow. He says, "I suppose it is tempting, if the only tool you have is a hammer, to treat everything as if it were a nail." I suspect Maslow's metaphor has become such a cliche because it's so darn true. The tools we have, or the tools we choose to employ, determine how we see the challenge. Now, here's a little story about attention for you. The story goes that a respected rabbi in 19th century Poland went with his students to see the latest wonder of the age, a steam engine. The rabbi, when he saw it, clapped in delight, while the students scowled and covered their ears at the smoke and the noise of the train. As they were walking away from this wonder, his students asked the rabbi, "Whatever can this loud, infernal machine mean, Rabbi? It's merely more smoke and more noise in our world." To which the rabbi said, "Pay closer attention. See how the engine pulls many cars behind it. Just so, one hot, intense person can lead many indifferent, cold people. Notice how the train comes and goes exactly on schedule. Just so, we must respect our time, or we will be left behind. Also, that train links us to the rest of Europe. In this shattered world, every link is precious." That's a little story about paying attention to what you're actually seeing. What we pay attention to is what we see. The students paid attention to the smoke and the noise. The rabbi saw lessons in leadership, the value of time, and hopes of connection. It's all in what you pay attention to. When all we have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Now, for example, research indicates that political pundits, those guys on TVs, their predictions about what's going to happen are correct less than 50% of the time. Why are they less reliable than a flip of the coin? Because they only use the hammer of their own ideology. Thus, every situation looks like the nail of whatever lens they have. A hammer is dogma, and dogma requires motivated reasoning. But every situation isn't a nail. And thus, flipping a coin gives you a more accurate prediction of the future than do political pundits. All of us can be that way. When we ourselves have only the hammers of, progressivism, liberalism, conservatism, all those dogmas, or the hammer of a particular religion or a particular anti-religion. Abraham Maslow is teaching us that we do well to look at the problem first, then decide which tool to use. Is it a nail? Is it a screw? Is it a bolt? Might glue work better? What kind of glue? Now, no, in real life we can't sit down and carefully think through every issue that arises. We have to remind ourselves of our natural limitations, of course, but we should always remember that's not the only way. The 20th century Spanish philosopher José Ortega y Gasset said, "Yo soy yo y mi circunstancia." I am I and my circumstances, which I think in English is better rendered, I am both myself and my circumstances. This was the center and starting place of Gasset's philosophy. Popeye would say, "I am what I am," which nowadays he would say, "That's the way I roll." All of us are who we are because of many, many, many factors. That's why it's so darn difficult to sort things out in our own mind. In the face of challenges, directing attention toward using a proper tool can keep us focused, however. This is the power of directed attention, and that became the cornerstone of philosophies in Asia.
So I have a story. Because, very similar to David, I am very hyperattention deficit disorder all the way through. I don't stay still. My mind doesn't stay still. And so I'm just going to share with you, this is life. It wakes up to itself, offering new visions of who it will be daily. Life is beautiful. Beautiful in the sense that it doesn't require a confirmation of pretense. It is beautiful because it knows itself. It is self-affirmation. It is self-affirmation. It exists with or without anyone else. One day, life heard a knocking at the door. "Who is it?" they asked. The entity said, "Love." Life said, "Love who?" Life wasn't expecting any guest, and not many folk know how to embrace life itself. With a tender voice, Love continued, "I am unapologetic love." Love and life stood at the threshold of the cosmos. They gazed at each other in fullness. Certain, uneasy, kind, but reserved, desirable, but yet resistant. Life said, "I've never experienced this feeling before." And Love asked, "What do you feel?" Life responded, "Fear." Love said, "I have that effect upon folk who first opened up the doors to me. So pardon me, I mean you no harm." And Life asked Love, "How do you feel?" Love hesitantly responded, I feel free." And Life said, "Yeah, I have that effect on others as well. It's uncontrollable sometimes. That's why I kind of stay locked away. Kind of want to stay to myself." Love looked with discernment and then asked bashfully, "Life, would you mind helping me be free?" And Life, uncertainty, free in mind, free in spirit, free to be me. And Life looked, "Sure, I guess." But Life also had a request of Love. And then, "So, could you help me, Love, face my fears? Go to the unexpected places that I have yet to discover. Go to the places that I don't know about myself. Sit with apprehensions. Sit in places that are radical and untouched. Can you, Love, help me embrace life? And Life, can you help me embrace love?" And they hugged each other. And Life trembled for a moment and whispered, "Just when I thought I was the last one who was the unapologetic one, you came along in the middle of my cosmos and shared the same name as me."
Yeah, thank you. Why do people love love is what, when I read that, I got to thinking. And I think it is because falling in love, or loving, is a radical reorientation of attention. Suddenly, I love that. I love that person. I love chocolate, whatever, But no, chocolate doesn't radically reorient it. But love is a radical reorientation of attention, I think. You remember the song, or heard the song, "I'm looking over a four-leaf clover I overlooked before." Radical reorientation of attention. Now, as someone with ADHD, I know that song was written by Mort Dixon, who's most famous for writing "Bye Bye Blackbird," which was the last words of the gangster John Dillinger after he was shot outside the Biograph Theater in Chicago in 1934. Which reminds me, it was a message to his girlfriend, which reminds me of the phrase "star-crossed lovers," Romeo and Juliet, right? And about an article I recently read in the New Yorker. Astrology is back in a really big way. Yeah. Now, before you poo-poo astrology with your reason hammer, notice that astrology is a classic case of paying attention and thereby seeing things in a new way, which can be paradoxically helpful, even if what you're looking at doesn't exactly make sense. It's all in how you pay your attention. Astrology hasn't been this popular since another uncertain age back in the 1970s, when, of course, the cliche was, "What's your sign?" as a pickup line. Today, 30% of Americans, especially younger Americans, believe that astrology holds answers to many of life's questions. In the New Yorker article I mentioned, columnist Christine Smallwood writes this, quote, "It's a commonplace to say that in uncertain times people crave certainty. But what astrology offers isn't certainty, it's distance. Just as a person may find it easier to accept things about herself that she decides she was born that way, astrology makes it possible to see world events as a less reactive position. It posits that history is not a linear story of upward progress, but instead cycles, and that historical actors, the ones running amok everywhere around us, are archetypes. Alarming, yes, villainous, perhaps, but familiar and readable," end quote. So yeah, we live in a culture of anxiety and panic. Stuff like climate change and growing poverty and constant injustice and political upheaval, stuff like that. So where do we put our attention? Calling attention is exactly what astrology is all about. Astrology apps abound, as do good old-fashioned print books. Two Twitter astrologers call themselves the Astro Poets. They're Dorothea Lasky and Alex Dimitrov. Their first book just appeared. It's called Astro Poets, Your Guides to the Zodiac. Now, when I was reading about this in the New Yorker, I had to look that book up. And you can get parts of it on Amazon, that peek inside thing. And so I opened up to mine, Aries. Guess what? What should be the first thing in the chapter but a quote from one of my favorite poets, Frank O'Hara. And now I know he is a fellow Aries, as is Mariah Carey. Nah, we don't wish today's game was old again. We just wish it wasn't full of draconian, Babylonian phony men, which is in a Mariah Carey song, but it's by Nas, the rapper. More musical trivia that I know for some reason. You can't make up this kind of stuff, though, right? The cover of the Astro Poets book consciously patterns itself in color, in typeface, and in visual styles on those really cool, great late 1960s acid rock concert posters, right? And so it is thereby alluding to that most notorious era of experiments in consciousness. To my mind, the astropoets have hit upon the actual essence of astrology, the fact that it is myth and poetry, not science. As Amanda Hess says, you don't have to actually believe in astrology to be in it. One recurring Twitter meme is, astrology is fake, but ... Astrology is fake, but ... And Hess, she's a New York Times writer, sums it up this way, quote, "There's a silly kind of pleasure to be taken in twisting scientific data points, birth dates, orbits, planetary alignments into little morality plays about our inconsequential personal dramas." End quote. The New Yorker article reports astro-poet Alex Dimitrov is saying this, quote, "It's about negative capability." Y'all know about Keats, right? You read that? I'll have to talk about him another day, right? It's all about negative capability. This was his big poet thing. To endure doubt is ultimately the only thing you can do in life. To not strive for meaning or answers, and to endure the state that you find yourself in. End quote. One tweeter, or Twitterer, whatever it is, one Twitterer says, "How can the astropoets always tell me exactly what my therapist just told me?" And well, now that's a good question, isn't it? Well, it's not magic. It's about using poetry to get people paying attention. Here's what the astropoets write about you Pisces for the last week of October. Why did I choose Pisces? Ooh. But here it is. A cresting mood is already an accident, or always an ending that bleeds in bad time. The music of the sky is rising everywhere. You know you can hear it, so just listen. End quote. Not bad advice. Well, we can all do whatever our astrological sign with listening to the music of the sky rising everywhere, can't we? Some social critics are likening the popularity of astrology today to the popularity of psychoanalysis back in the 1950s. After all, you can say that someone is a narcissist, or you can say someone is just a Pisces. If you're not a psychologist, how do you know the difference anyway? Now, I don't intend to learn enough about astrology to be able to say stuff like that. But either way of describing a personality is a poetry of attention, isn't it? And either way of describing someone is a way of examining an archetype. New York Times columnist Amanda Hess calls astrology the cosmic BuzzFeed quiz. And she goes on to write about a site called GirlBiz that advises this, quote, "Astrology-based gifts scream considered and magical, even if the relationship between said sun sign and said gift is tenuous. At the very least, it says, oh, I know your birthday. And thus," end quote, "and thus, the association of young astrologers is booming as millennials leave organized religion behind and search for meaning and archetypes elsewhere. It's all about where we put our attention and how we pay attention. Do we stare blankly into the flood of life's events, or do we notice a pattern in the stars and embrace the poetry of action? It's sometimes a bit difficult to notice, but you know what? You have lots of tools in your tool belt besides that hammer. We discover this by paying attention. When we focus up and get in the moment and look around at actual challenges, we discover we have lots of tools for handling any situation that arises. So I'll end by reading one of my favorite poems by the American poet Louise Gluck. It's called Field Flowers. In the poem, the speaker is a flower talking to a human being standing in a field of flowers, and the flower is asking some questions. "What are you saying?" asks the flower, "that you want eternal life? Are your thoughts really as compelling as all that? Certainly, you don't look at us. You don't listen to us. On your skin, stain of sun, dust of yellow buttercups. I'm talking to you. You staring through bars of high grass, shaking your little, oh my soul, oh my soul. It's enough that you look inward. Contempt for humanity is one thing, but why disdain the expansive field, your gaze rising over the clear heads of the wild buttercups? Rise into what? Your poor idea of heaven, which is absence of change? Is that better than the earth? How would you know who are neither here nor there, even though you're standing in our midst? Neither here nor there. In the midst of beauty, wishing to be somewhere else. All because we don't pay attention to what's happening here and now. I'll ask you to pay attention. The music of the sky is rising everywhere. You know you can hear it. Just listen. Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis by visiting our website at firstunitarian.org.